All right, people. Today we are talking one of my favorite films as a person and as a boxer because I gotta do it. This is my show. This is my thing. I gotta share both worlds. We are talking Raging Bull. Please like, subscribe, follow us on YouTube, comment, let us know what you think. We love hearing what you think. It's awesome. It both supports us and gives us an ego boost, and it helps us tactically place what you're asking for, what you want to see. So, without further ado, here we go, people. This is Raging Bull. Raging Bull is obviously one of my favorite films. Now, the reason that's my favorite film as a filmmaker is the lighting, the composition, and of course, the performance. It's a great experience. It's a wild ride. It's dark. It's heavy. It's a noir. So it's got a lot of different elements as a filmmaker I can admire and I can really appreciate. As a person, the story is a sadistic, hardcore tragedy. If you haven't seen Raging Bull, you really need to go see this, especially before you watch this. But the story is of a boxer from New York named Jake LaMotta. Now, this is a real person, and Jake LaMotta himself said that this film was a little bit of a, what did he say? Don't quote me. But basically what he had said was he was worse in real life than he was in this film, than he was portrayed by Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro actually fought 3 professional fights in preparation for this. He won 2 of them and lost the third. His training with Jake LaMotta, and as Jake LaMotta being who he was, Jake LaMotta was a hardcore boxer that just wouldn't go down. This is a guy that just got hit and kept taking hits. He was a brutal, vicious fighter that had many knockouts, fought many wars, fought with Sugar Ray Robinson, lost, I think he fought him twice. I cannot remember. But he lost to Sugar Ray Robinson. He's a regarded, a heavily appreciated boxer to an extent in the boxing community, but a legend nonetheless. In the story, you are following Jake right before he goes up towards the championship fights. Jake is having a hard time with his relationship when he's living in New York with his first love, whatever the situation was. And he is trying to get through his boxing career. He's trying to get up to the championship. He's trying to get where he needs to go. And the fact is that nobody wants to fight him. People are scared of Jake LaMotta. Jake is a rough guy. He's a tough dude. And he's somebody that if you're fighting to get up to the championship, that's going to be a hard fight. So what does Jake do? Jake decides to, so what happens to Jake is as Jake is going through, he makes mistakes in his career. He makes mistakes in his relationship. He is a brutal, vicious animal. He's kind of a bit of a dog. And the tragedy is that Jake is no good even for himself. He ends up throwing a fight to get some more money, to get some more of, to get more things that he deems will be better and really heavily regrets it. He throws himself into situations and gets himself in trouble constantly. And the biggest problem is his jealousy aspect. Jake LaMotta is a very jealous person. And so when he is with his new love, he is constantly, it's explained as a goddess complex, which means a man in his case with a goddess complex sees a woman as either an untouchable, angelic goddess or a complete dirty fucking whore, right? That's the two. That's how they kind of deal with it. They have this narcissistic behavior, this feeling about it. So when he gets with this woman who he deems as a goddess, once he's able to have sex with her, once he's able to be with her, she kind of loses that appeal and he becomes abusive and toxic and just not a very great guy. As this moves forward, he has kids, he ends up retiring from boxing, he ends up moving forward with his life into darker days where he is running his own club, and then he ends up giving these drinks to these younger underage girls that he didn't realize they were underage, and then they end up getting molested, and the whole situation runs down this rabbit hole of this tragedy of this boxer who never really reached his full potential, and it was mostly because of his own actions, his own fault. Now, this film was made by Martin Scorcese, And this film was heavily experimental in a lot of the framing, and they talk about this in the commentary. It is beautiful to watch what they did with the lighting, what they did with the effects. A lot of times, or this film back when it was first made was a little bit more brutal than, we would look at for today's standard, where we would say, yeah, this is a little light, or the boxing was a little bit goofy. Back then, this was hardcore. That amount of blood, pumping out of the head, that amount of, violence, and the way that Robert De Niro played the character was he played this more like a horror movie, and that's kind of how it felt. They actually used fire and steam to then make the ring look like it was, to show the heat in the arena, to show, the warp of the lens, and they play with different lighting techniques and dolly zooms, which we had talked about, to make a character look bigger, to make a character look more, to make a character look harder to beat. And it was played with along beautiful, tactical, strategic, just wonderful camera movements, following the character and spinning around and then being reintroduced to that character as he was winning on one side of the fight and now he's losing on the other side of the fight. And it was just an element to where, as a boxer, you can really appreciate this film and then what it represents and the techniques that it was put in. These are people that understood boxing. These are people that understood, at least to an extent, but understood the story of Jake LaMotta. Then going outwards, every frame had a purpose. Every frame felt like it belonged, and the character was shown getting darker and getting worse. And as he got fatter, one of the best scenes that to this day people talk about was Robert De Niro's performance in the cell, going up and in strict, hardcore noir fashion, punching the wall and releasing his inner demons and being locked in this cage of darkness. These are different elements that can be used and that should be studied by the filmmaker. You should watch this film on all different levels. You should watch it for the way that the story is told. How do they get from scene to scene? How do they get from location to location? And how does the characters' relationships change? And at what point do they change? The relationships between his love life on both sides are rough on either woman. Then his relationship with his brother, as he was attempting to push him and trying to get him to a higher place and a better spot of life. He is then betrayed completely by Jake when Jake is assuming that he's sleeping with his wife. It is thrown out of proportion completely. That whole fight scene, it just comes out of nowhere to the brother, and then cuts away a whole nother section of his life, of the people that were supporting him. You have a guy that's turning in on himself, and what better way to describe that, to expose that, than to watch the frame get darker, watch the scenery close in on itself, watch him get bigger and lose away the shine. These are different elements that I brought into my own film when I made Cut. When I made Cut, we did it a lot more in your face and a lot faster, where we started the film very bright, and then as we progressed, get darker and darker and darker and darker until you were surrounded in complete darkness. That was the whole point. That was the whole purpose, was to take that character, Tommy Bugrov, who is like a more fictionalized, crazy version of Jake LaMotta, and shroud him in nothing but despair, right? Which happens to Jake LaMotta. The lighting and the effects of Raging Bull can be used when you study for films that are in color and films that are completely separate, because they create different shapes on the face, they create different elements of the scenery, and they create different effects as far as the tone. The lighting and the shadows and the shapes that are cast by noir films will help you even if you're not shooting a noir film, because you can create these elements on a much lesser scale, which will still read subconsciously to your audience. When there is that thing, and I've described this when we talked about Terminalist, making someone two-faced can expose a lie. Now the audience might not catch on to it, but it still is doing it subconsciously and is something that some audience members might catch on to, and it'll be extremely entertaining to them. There are so many elements that watching these kind of films will assist you with. And then action sequences. Learn what to do and what not to do. Understanding this boxing film and watching the boxing maneuvers and the choreography they did and seeing where it worked and where it didn't work, where it looked realistic and where it didn't look realistic, but paying attention to the visual sensation of that character of Jake LaMotta, Robert De Niro, when he's beating the living crap out of that first guy, just slamming him with hooks, and seeing all the snot and the saliva flying around. That kind of feeling is what you could take away to then put into your project to show another actor, or to show somebody that you're working with, this is kind of the element of what I'm looking for. This is what I'm trying to get. That will make them understand in a way that is supremely black and white. So, Raging Bull, that is just a quick little blurb just talking about the different story and just kind of giving it a little bit of just pointing you in a direction. That's all that this is. Saying, hey, you should study this film for these reasons because this is what it's going to bring out for you. You're going to understand lighting a lot better. You're going to understand framing as well, and what you can and can't do, and how to play with it in more of a black and white state. And plus, on the side of that, the deeper that you look into this film, the more that you'll really be able to see, the more that you'll really be able to understand as far as how you can take a character and throw them into despair, how you can change a person when their personality isn't necessarily changing. Jake LaMotta is the same as he was when he started versus how he ended. For the most part, he never really changed as far as who he was inside. He was always this hard man that was very, very violent and very tortured. And by the end, it's the same kind of thing. It's just now he's just got a lot of extra padding put on. So understanding how that change has affected his world instead, and seeing how to change a world, how to make an entire location or an entire story be the arc, be the character's arc that isn't actually the character. That can be something that'll be very unique for you. So I hope that really helped out. I hope that you watch that film and that you find something from it, because it really is a good one. Plus, Robert De Niro is gold in it. It's young Robert De Niro. He is just full of fire and flame. And watching the behind the scenes and doing some more digging on the story, you're going to really find some cool stuff in there. I mean, it's awesome. And if you're an athlete, if you're a boxer, what are you doing? Especially if you're a boxer, go watch that movie, man. It's just inspiration. It's really cool. Make you feel like you're tough. You can put on, the Robert De Niro face and walk around like this. So, whatever. Anyways, please follow us on Danger Dog Productions. You can do it on Facebook, on YouTube. Please follow us also on dangerdogproductions.com, where you can actually get some of our merchandise and you can put some money into the Danger Dog's bowl. He loves the treats. Just hook him up, He watches these movies too. He likes movies too. Come on. Work with him. What are you talking about? All right. Thanks, everybody. Catch you next time.